In the state of Minnesota, it is illegal to vote if you have a felony on your record and you are still on probation, parole, or incarcerated.
Hold on! What the heck's going on here? You almost forgot about me. Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm 9 years old and I go to Salem Lutheran Church in North Minneapolis. And I'm here today to get my questions answered and learn something about voting rights in Minnesota. Now let's try this again. First of all, what even is Restore the Vote?
Restore the Vote is work that we're doing. It's part of a broader coalition that is working to change that law in the state of Minnesota, to make it so that folks who are living and working in our communities, who are paying taxes in our communities, are in fact able to vote and have their voice heard in the democratic process.
And the reason why we're in this situation is because about 200 years ago, when people were writing the Minnesota Constitution, they wanted folks who were convicted of felonies to not be able to vote while they were still being punished for felonies. Fast forward 165 years, and here we are with 6 times the number of felonies on the books and like 58 times the number of people who are disenfranchised because they are convicted of these felonies. So we've gotten really far away from the idea that if you like murder somebody, you shouldn't vote while you're being punished for murder. And we're now at a spot where if you steal an expensive pair of shoes, you can't vote while you're being punished for that behavior.
I can't vote either. What's so bad about that?
I believe it is fundamental to our identity as Americans that the founding value of our nation is one that proclaims that all people are equal. And anything that dehumanizes people and therefore makes them less than others is an affront to our democracy. It's also an affront to my faith as a Christian.
I feel like there's no reason why people who are still impacted by the laws should not be able to vote and participate.
You know, I just thought about it from a common sense point of view. I'm like, well, if you're coming out of the prison system or if you're on parole and rights are taken away from you, that doesn't make sense, because aren't we trying to rebuild people's lives and restore rights for people and give them responsibilities so that they can rebuild their lives?
Not having the right to vote is something that affects whole communities in ways that are maybe unexpected. For example, studies have shown that young people are more likely to vote when they become voting age if they see their parents going to the polls and voting and they experience that with them. But in communities where a large number of people are disenfranchised, children aren't seeing their parents going to vote.
If I believe I'm not being heard, if I believe I'm not being counted, if I believe no one cares about me, I'm going to live a life that's going to reflect that. So it's important for me to believe and to hear and feel the fact that my voice in my life is being heard, I'm being seen, I'm being counted, and that my life matters. And then therefore I can live a life, a better life, more worthy and more worthy of respect and integration into main society.
I get why not having the right to vote makes people sad and mad, but what about all these church people? Why should they care about it?
It's very important for us as Lutherans to work to restore the vote because of grace.
In the scriptures, it talks about how Jesus set the captive free, and that's exactly what he did. You look throughout Jesus' entire ministry, he was always liberating people and bringing them deeper into community, especially folks who were pushed out of community and they were told that they didn't belong because of like a myriad of different reasons, but people who were excluded, who were criminalized, who were dehumanized. Jesus was saying, no, I came to rehumanize you, to show you that you are beloved, you are part of this beloved community. And so I think as people of faith, especially Lutherans who organize our lives around grace, how can we extend that grace beyond just ourselves to people who are also criminalized and excommunicated from society, especially when they've already, quote unquote, paid their debt to society?
There's no Jesus in that. Absolutely no Jesus in that. In fact, when the woman was caught in the act of adultery, the crime was to be stoned. The man wasn't there, but the crime was to be stoned, and Jesus said, not today, not today. And he interrupted that sentence.
I care about people. I care about what happens to them, and I care about people that are marginalized or don't have the same rights as we do, or aren't noticed. And I think it's just so important not to forget.
We as Lutherans, with Martin Luther really as a primary example, have always been called into the public square. I mean, Martin Luther said, if your town needs a mayor, run for mayor. If it needs a school, help build a school. If your town has a poor criminal justice system and there are specific parts of it that are particularly racist, then get engaged in some ways to make change for the sake of this neighbor whom you love.
So this is definitely something us church folks should care about. But wait, isn't this supposed to be racial justice organizing?
In the state of Minnesota, most people who are disenfranchised are in fact white people, but that's just because the majority of the people who live in the state of Minnesota are white. However, BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, Latino in particular, are much more highly and disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, including disenfranchisement. When large swaths of the African American community and the Indigenous community are disenfranchised and don't have a say in the political process here in the state of Minnesota, that is very much a racial justice issue.
And so with the way our system and our country are run, in order for us to have power, in order for us to really get at the root of what systemic racism is, that's been codified in all of our laws over generations and generations of power transfer, you really need to bring the power back to the people. And as people have their voting rights stripped away from them, they no longer have the power in which to make any real lasting change in our country.
By disenfranchising such large numbers of people who identify as folks of color, we're essentially silencing that group of people, and that's what makes it a racial justice issue.
I don't know much about laws in Minnesota. Can somebody explain to me how we can fix this?
Our legislature, like all legislatures in the states, are broken into a House and a Senate. A bill has to be introduced and pass the House and introduced and pass the Senate in order for it to get to the governor's office and be signed into law. The House and the Senate break themselves into these smaller little units called committees that have ownership over different topic areas. The House has one that's about criminal justice system issues, the Senate has one that's about criminal justice system issues, and those committees are where bills need to be heard in order to have a chance of ever becoming law. And so committees are super important. Who sets the agenda in a committee is the chair of the committee.
Showing up as a mass group is really how we demonstrate our power. And the more we can do that, the more we can rally people to speak out so that we can have the ears of our senators, our state senators, the more success that we're going to have.
Wow, I guess we've got a lot of work to do. I hope everyone has the right to vote by the time I can vote.